Okay, so this is a su-85 video covering the installation, creation, and installation of the main gun. We should probably start by putting a hole in the chassis to accept the main gun. Now, I will start a hole with a pen of some sort, just so it's easy to get in exactly the right place, which is just below the center of the circle. And then I'm going to take my 1/16 bit and just enlarge that, but in the wrong direction, as you can see, a bit. And then I'm going to want to drill my hole straight in once it's kind of started. And there's a lot of material to get through here, so it won't be easy getting this hole in there. Then I'm going to use my 1/8 bit to enlarge that further. And you should always kind of aim in like this, on this angle. And then once you've got it, start, like even with a larger bit, get the hole started this way, and then aim straight into the vehicle, or you'll slip up and up into there. And while you probably won't do too much damage, except maybe if you hit this, it's quite annoying, especially when it's happening over and over again. So with this one, you kind of want to really make sure that you're on a flat or slightly elevated or slightly depressed plane, but not. And also coming into the vehicle straight from the front. Because they had limited traverse on these guns, so you have to get it pretty close to straight. Just take a knife and trim this back a bit here. Scraper, rather. Now you don't have to worry if you damage. Oops. What was that stuck there? If you damage this area a little bit, this is all covered. Try not to damage it too much out here, but in this area you can be pretty rough. Now I'm just going to use a skewer to make sure that that's going to accept a gun. Don't have to go super deep. You can see that it's kind of a bit elevated more than I wanted to, so I'm going to stick this bit back in here. And now if I put down pressure, then the tip is lifted and I can modify the level of the gun. There we go. There's a lot of, like, it's not only this plate and this superstructure, but there's also bits of tank back there, because you're entering on the same plane as this. So that's why it's pretty hard to level the gun well. But once you get that, then we can move on to carving the gun. And this one's pretty similar to the T-34-85, if you've done that one. So just mark where the length is. And you shouldn't have to mark anything else, because everything else is buried. And then just follow that mark around. Just to be careful that we get our score line straight. Oh, and one thing you want to make sure of when you're selecting your skewer for this is that you got nice straight grain and the piece of wood you're carving is straight. So you don't want something all warped or with knots or anything like that. That's why bamboo skewers are the best for this. See, I'm getting little curlies along the whole length. So this is going to be an easy piece of skewer to carve. When you have to struggle for each bit, that you know you've got too hard, too piece. It was probably just cut too close to the outside of the bamboo. I mean, it works good as a barbecue skewer, but for our purposes, not so much. So this has quite a bit of taper to it, so you won't be taking much off the base, but you're going to take a lot off here. So generally it's a good idea to kind of carve, to start the taper, and then as you carve from the very base, you kind of even it out a bit. And every time I take a bit off, I'm spinning the skewer to try to keep the amount I take off each edge fairly even. Now, most skewers will have like a sort of a softer side and a harder side, so try to keep your eye on where you've stripped more off of as you go around. And you can back cut like this, but I don't suggest you cut very much this way. Because especially if you start back here, it's easy to slip under the grain and then you can lift off a whole side. So short strokes towards the back until you've kind of got it at the shape you want it. And then you can come forward again. And if you start seeing ridges, you don't have to worry about getting it exactly round, but you can take down ridges by turning your blade to a 90 degree. Just kind of carving along, and that will sometimes help to round it a bit better than actually carving, because this way you're taking off a lot more material. When you do it this way, you're very restricting the amount that you take off by quite a bit. But you do hit those high areas a lot more than you hit the low areas. So it's a good way to do some final rounding before hitting it with sandpaper. So again, you don't have to get it perfect. You're not looking... The sandpaper will do that, or get it a lot closer than you can with a knife. Just need to get it close to the shape that you want it, or you'll be sanding forever. And again, the template is just sort of a guide. Don't be too worried if your size doesn't look like what the template does. There's a lot of variation between models available. So if you've looked at a few different companies' 1:72 models, you'll realize that, oh, okay, they're just kind of winging their gun size anyways. Where they should be more accurate than anyone else, really, if you ask me. But regardless, so this is just kind of a middling size between the various models you'll find. So once you've got it to a happy place, you can sand down the front a bit. And then either cut yourself, or I think I've got a piece sitting around here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. A little square of sandpaper. just kind of form a pocket around the skewer and then spin the skewer, or you can move it like this. This way is a little bit quicker, but the spinning of it makes it more rounded. So generally I just apply lots of pressure and spin that for a while. And use like really fine sandpaper for this. And this is 320 grit, so really fine. You could use a little bit rougher than this, but wouldn't go excessively rough, as you're just trying to make it look like finished steel. So should be round and not too scratched up. So once you're happy with that, now as a finishing touch, I'm going to cut this back a bit so I can show you. I'll leave enough to hold though. Take your 1/16 bit and just put it right in the center. And then work yourself a little concave divot. You might want to take it off and then view as you see whether you're in the center of the gun or not, because the gun isn't much larger than the 1/16 bit toward the tip. So you have to be really careful you don't strip off sides. You don't want to ruin your gun now after all the work you've put into it. Oops. So you're just trying to create a little concave area that you can fill with black paint when you're done. There we go. Looks good enough. Okay, so I'm going to cut this down a bit more, just to make it easier to set in the vehicle there. Maybe leave a centimeter or so. And I'm going to sharpen it up a little bit. So again, it goes in a little bit easier to the hull.